Hello, everybody. Looks like we are live here. Welcome back to another Offstreet webinar, everyone. Good to see a lot of people in the attendee list here, which is exciting. It has been a minute since our last one, and that's simply because our team has been busy enjoying the summer, hanging out at IPMI, but I'm so happy to be back and on your screens again. I hope y'all didn't miss me too much. But if you did, you can let me know in the chat. I'll definitely let you type that in there. If it is your first time here, hello, my name is Kyle, and I'm a marketing specialist here on the Off Street team. And for some reason, they trust me to host these things. But if you don't want to tell everyone how much you miss me, feel free to drop in the chat where you're tuning in from today. Looks like there's quite a bit of people, so excited to see where people are tuning in from. I am personally located at my apartment in Calgary, Alberta. Hi, Whitney. I see you in the chat there. Um, and while you're doing that, I will dive into why we're all here today. So today's webinar is all about unlocking revenue with payments. So over the next 30 or so minutes, we're going to hear the real story of how San Diego State University transformed its approach to event parking with payments. Now, if you're looking to see how you stack up against a school like SDSU in a size and staff aspect, check out the slide right now that we're sharing, kind of showing SDSU by the numbers. So they have 36,000 plus students. They have around 288 acres, 14,000 parking stalls, 11 garages, 18 surface lots, and their parking team consists of 9 parking enforcement officers, 9 office staff, and 30 student assistants. So take a look at that, kind of compare yourself with that, just kind of put that in your mind for when we're going through everything today. Now, furthermore, we'll talk about how they started, what the implementation process looked like, the lessons they learned along the way, and ultimately how payments helped them create a better guest experience while generating more than $500,000 in net revenue across a variety of parking programs. So you can see all those super cool, fun, quick stats on the screen there right now. Our goal today is to share a real customer story and hopefully spark a few ideas that you can take back to your own campus. So we'll leave a few minutes at the end for questions. So if something comes up, into your mind throughout the webinar, don't be shy. Drop it in the chat or into the Q&A panel at any time, and we'll do our best to get to them before we wrap up. Now, I definitely don't want to be the only one talking to everyone today, so let me introduce our two guests of honor, is what I'm calling them. First, we are joined by Chris Sumner from San Diego State University. Chris has played a key role in expanding how SDSU uses off-street payments from commencement and athletics, conferences, and campus events. And today he'll be sharing what that journey looked like from his perspective. Thanks, Chris, for being with us today.
Morning.
And we are also joined by Imogen, product manager here at Offstreet. So Imogen works closely with customers and our development team to shape the future of Offstreet payments. And throughout today's conversation, she'll provide some broader context around what we're seeing across higher ed and share some advice for campuses considering payments. So thank you for being here, both Chris and Imogen. Thank you for taking the time to join us today to chat all about payments. Now, I'm excited to dive in, but before I start peppering our guests with some questions, I have a question for the audience. So I'm going to throw it over to you guys. Feel free to drop your answers in the chat with everyone. I'm curious, what do you wish that your current mobile payment provider could do? Let us know in the chat. What do you wish it could do? Is it, make things easier for you? Do you think, yeah, I don't know what it could be. Anything. But while you guys are dropping those in the chat, I am going to start it off with Chris. So, Chris, kind of getting into the SDSU story of it all, can you tell us a little bit about your role at SDSU?
Yeah, of course, Kyle. So my name is Chris Sumner. Pleasure to meet everybody here on the call. I am the Associate Director of Transportation Services here at San Diego State University. I've been in this role for, I think I'm about to hit my fifth year this month. But I've been with the university for over 10 years now. I started out as a student employee and kind of worked my way up the chain. And it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, we're so happy to have you. Now, okay, before implementing Offstreet Payments, what did event parking look like on campus at San Diego State?
Yeah, so I do manage all of our parking enforcement and special event operations. And before off-street payments, we did kind of what everybody does, where we partnered with Laz Parking and put out basically cashiers at all of our garages and our parking lots for events. And they were out there with credit card readers. We are a cashless campus ever since COVID, so we don't take cash payments anymore, but we do have LAS cashiers with credit card scanners at the entrances of our garages. And then we also use LAS's prepay LAS Go system for pre-sale purchases for permits.
Exciting. Okay, so what kind of challenges were you looking to, I guess, solve when it came to payments?
There were several challenges that we were definitely trying to solve. One big challenge for us was the rise in costs of staffing and the credit card reading equipment that they use. Um, they, regularly had to get replacement readers. The credit card fees continue to rise, and then LAS staffing costs also rise year over year. Um, we also wanted something that integrated with our campus permit system. The LAS Go system did not have any integration with our campus, so we couldn't actually conduct any enforcement, not in any meaningful way at least. We had a pretty bad lack of control over the data and the system itself. We were relying on reports from LAS to be sent over to us on a monthly basis. There would be delays with getting that information over to us sometimes. And then we also wanted to improve the customer experience when you're accepting payments at the entrances of garages. That's going to back up traffic. So we wanted something to help us kind of expedite traffic a little bit more and help get those interactions flowing as quickly as possible.
Yeah, that is quite a bit of challenges. It sounds like Whitney's with you there on the credit card fees. She says they're a huge issue. Okay, throwing it over to you, Imogen. Are these kind of the challenges that you're also hearing from other campuses who are implementing payments?
I'd say yes. The one that I'd probably rank first is data. The campuses can't get their own numbers out of their own vendor. And like Chris just described that. And what makes it so hard to fix is that it's structural. It's not only a service problem. When a vendor is running your pre-sales, the data lives in their system, and you end up asking for something that should have always been yours. And we know like most campuses have already done the expensive work from like virtual permits, bringing in LPR, like the whole apparatus. And what's left over is the guest parking, the one-off events, the department that needs 40 spots tomorrow. All of these are still typically running on workarounds because permitting systems were never really built for visitors. And it's that leftover, that 20% that ends up taking up most of your time. But the missing reports is like a mild version of this. The permits were in the vendor system and enforcement lived in SDSU, and there was nothing that joined the two, which meant that they could not enforce during events. They had a garage full of cars and no way to tell who'd paid for what, which leaves teams unable to like answer very basic questions like who bought parking for Saturday? Were the people who parked the people who paid? So what we rarely hear is like our system is old, but we all campuses share some version of like wanting agency over their own operations and to be able to answer questions about their own campus without having to ask somebody else for permission.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I think that's definitely very common. Okay, throwing it back to you, Chris. You listed all these challenges. They're popping up, it's costing money. What made you decide it was a time for change? Like, okay, this is it.
Yeah, there were basically two major things that happened that made us decide to make this change. The first was that we needed to raise our special event permit rates. Um, we were running into issues where some of our events were no longer profitable because of the higher costs. These were typically smaller scale events that required a lot of staffing. We were just losing money on them. So we needed to raise the rates, but we didn't want to raise the rates and just leave it at that. We wanted to raise the rates, but try to improve the experience for everybody on the customer end, on our own end, and for our campus venues and partners as well. Around the same time is when Offstreet actually put out those big updates to the events platform, and that was kind of the perfect storm for us of like, okay, we need to make this change. We need to get a system that works better than what we have now. And Offstreet just released all this really cool event stuff, and it was kind of the match made in heaven. It was a perfect pairing, perfect timing.
Love to hear that. Match made in heaven. Okay, so then was the goal to simply generate revenue, or were there like other operational improvements that you were kind of hoping or looking to make as well?
Yeah, there were other improvements we were looking at making as well. Like I mentioned earlier, we did want to try to improve our traffic flow into garages. So by doing like, for example, pre-sales through Offstreet instead of Las Go, those no longer, because they're integrated with our permit system on campus, those people can just drive in. They don't have to stop at the last cashier and actually make a credit card transaction that takes a minute or two, times 100 cars. That person can now just drive into the garage, park, and we can validate their permit through Offstreet with our license plate readers, making traffic flow much more quickly for event ingress.
Yeah.
Um, we also wanted to try to downscale our number of LAS staffing. We still do have LAS staffing on most of our events, but we were able to more or less cut our LAS staffing by 50%, um, essentially slashing our costs in half for staffing, and giving us a big, cost savings that way.
Yeah. Yeah, 50% is quite a bit. Okay, tossing it back to Imogen here. Before implementing payments, from your perspective, what are like the biggest concerns that campuses typically have?
Generally, there's like three big concerns that we hear. Guests come first. The fear that folks who've never paid for parking before will revolt. And when that does come up, it tends to be like the loudest objection, which is totally fair. The guest experience is everything. But the good news is that it's also tends to be the least founded, and our own customer data backs that up. Uh, the complaints are never really, or were never really about the price. They were about friction. One campus had guests hunting for payment or pay stations, waiting in lines to enter codes and hitting network outages when machines were down, and they replaced all of that with an off-street portal link. A pre-registration that guests can do from their phone before they arrive, and it was a game changer for them. Once you take that friction out, the backlash that people brace for mostly doesn't show up. The second is internal politics, and this one is very valid and fair, because parking almost never owns the decision alone. You need a yes from departments who have no stake in your problem. Athletics is fine with it. Advancement would rather a donor didn't notice a parking charge at all. Nobody's being difficult. It just isn't their budget. And you don't win that by convincing everybody up front. We had another campus. They started with one department. It was their biggest user, and they went and sat with them in person, and they walked through it with them, and it worked. Word traveled, and other departments started emailing them asking to be switched over, which is like, as a product manager, music to my ears. Um, and they had the whole main campus across the line within a few months. All you really need is one department to be tr to try it and be glad that they did. The third is the business case, and the bar for that has really moved. somewhat better than what you already have doesn't clear it anymore. And this is the one that you can't like talk your way past. You have to put a result in front of people. And the best example of that is sitting on the call with us right now. SDSU did $581,000 in revenue in a year through Offstreet Payments, and Chris can tell you what it took to get there. What's really interesting though is like a lot of the objections that come up and that are brought up with us are all about the risk of doing something new. Um, but generally, like underneath it all, it's about like the opposite risk, the cost of doing nothing. Um, they saw staffing and hardware costs raise every year while the prices stayed the same, and until suddenly into like events they were running profitably for years were no longer covering themselves. That's a risk that rarely makes anyone's list, but it's genuinely like usually the one that ends up costing you the most.
Mhm. I love that what you said. It's the like the risk of not taking action, I guess. Good words. Okay, we're going into more of the rollout now. We talked about like all these challenges, they're piling up, they're piling up. It's, eventually it's going to break the camel's back. Chris, getting into the rollout, how did you approach implementing paid event parking?
Yeah, so we took a very detailed strategy, and basically we have a guy in our department. His name is Scott. He should be on the call right now. So I'm going to give him a nice little shout out here.
Shout
Um,
out Scott.
but he's a brilliant guy, and he basically built us like an internal model, essentially an algorithm that basically analyzed all of our costs and our average revenues, and tied those to expected attendance size. And he did this all without AI, which I think is incredible. I'm pretty confident you can do this with AI today. But when we were kind of rolling this out, Scott did all of this by hand in Excel, and basically built a model that would allow us to kind of scale up or down our operation based on the size of the event and the venue that it's located at. Obviously, anybody here who works in events knows that different venues or different types of events can dramatically change what happens with the parking patterns and how much revenue you generate. So all of that was taken into account into this algorithm, and allowed us to plug in different price points, right? So we can say, for the purposes of raising our prices, we could say, okay, we can raise it this much. We can do, events under a certain threshold can be used for off-street only, and we won't use any LAS staffing at all. Events that reach a certain threshold will use a combination of LAS and off-street and focus on off-street with the pre-sales. So we can scale up or down, um, based on that algorithm that was made by Scott. But again, I'm pretty confident you can do that with AI today. But that really gave us like a really informed direction on here's our strategy, and we can communicate this with our campus partners as well. As here's our strategy. If we're hitting these metrics, this is the demographic of the event. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to do off street only, or we're going to try to do off street pre-sale with LAS still cashiering with the credit card readers, or a combination, or we switch locations, and certain locations are taking credit card payments and other locations are off street only. So it gives us that really good like inflexibility in our operation that we didn't have before, but it's all driven through data that we now have.
Wow, that is exciting. I feel like Scott was AI before AI was AI. Got lots of love in the chat too for him, so that's awesome. Okay, so then, you built this strategy, you kind of explained that. How did other departments react to that?
There was a mixed reaction. I think a lot of departments were skeptical at first. Others were actually very excited, kind of when I pitched it to them. They seemed like, "Oh, okay, this might be a really good idea. Let's try it out." And others were completely indifferent. You really got the whole range of kind of response. But what I found was that we took the time to really meet with each of our campus partners, talk through, really did extensive work on planning. I think some of these changes we had planned going on 6 to 8 months before we actually rolled out. And over time, a lot of these departments that were resistant at first came around. And now I think everyone that is involved now believes that it was a great choice. I haven't heard any complaints about Offstreet itself or the implementation or rollout. Customers seem to be having a better experience too. So all in all, it was a great choice for us.
Ooh, love to hear that. Okay. Jumping over to Imogen, is Chris's experience typical to what you would see, I guess, with other campuses then?
The method that they use to get there is rare. And I want to give Scott his due here because it is like very impressive. But the instinct behind it is very typical. At the end of the day, every campus is trying to make that decision or like a version of that decision. Some decide by feel, some look at event to event, but ultimately, back to the data point, it's really hard to learn like what these decisions are costing them. And SDSU did a wonderful job of making that explicit and setting a threshold. The rollout shape is really common among campuses that have very efficient like rollouts. They take one thing, they prove it, and then they expand. The ones that tend to stall or move slowly are typically holding out for a moment where everything they can change everything at once, and ultimately that moment never arrives. And like what starting small buys you or starting narrow buys you is evidence instead of consent. If you're asking everyone to, move over, then everybody has to agree in advance on nothing but your enthusiasm. But if you ask for one and you come back in 8 weeks with a number, you have an argument now that's very hard to lose. So for SDSU, I'd say what they did was unusual in how rigorous it was, but completely normal in what it was for.
Hmm. Absolutely. Okay, so then Chris, what I guess surprised you the most during the rollout of this kind of stuff?
Yeah, so I think my biggest surprise was the adoption. Immediately from switching to from Lasgo to Offstreet just for pre-sales, we jumped from 30% pre-sale with Lasgo to 43% immediately in the next event. So that's quite a big jump. And I think that is attributed to, the ease of use and the customer experience for using Offstreet over other systems.
Hmm.
And then compliance rates with Offstreet, even if we have like minimal staffing, we're not taking payments on entry. For those events, I mean, we've seen compliance rates go above 90%, even above 96% in some cases. It all is very dependent on how you communicate the requirements. So we put out signage with QR codes. We have the event organizers send email blasts, and the communication is a big piece. But we've seen really good rates of compliance and adoption with Offstreet, and I would not have expected that, and for it to be so immediate as well.
Hmm. Yeah, I know your note on like signage and stuff like that. Troy in the chat said that t they do tons of signage. Website and lot ambassadors is how they spread the word about how to pay for parking at their state track meet on campus. So it's pretty similar. Um, Imogen, what would you say are the biggest like misconceptions that campuses have before implementing payments? What are things that they're maybe getting wrong a little bit in their head?
The first one we tend to hear is our guests will never go for this. The good news is they will. What people don't seem to tolerate is ambiguity, not knowing whether they're allowed to be there, whether the thing that they just did on their phone is actually going to work, whether there's going to be like a ticket waiting for them when they get back. Free and unclear parking is going to produce a lot more complaints than paid and obvious. And SCSU has, great compliance numbers that Chris just referred to. The second one is more subtle, and it's that setting a price is a pricing exercise. Some of it is card fee math, and I got this wrong for a long time. Um, on all of your transactions, there's going to be a percentage and a flat fee. So on a $5 sale, the flat fee is what hurts. 30 cents plus that percentage puts you at close to like 9% in transaction fees. On $100, the same rate card would cost you around like 3%. And event parking sits at the wrong end of that curve, which means when you're comparing processors for events, the flat fee deserves a lot more scrutiny than the rate that everyone sort of highlights in quotes.
Mm,
Um, both of those both of those come from like looking at the wrong end of the transaction ultimately. The guest is rarely the problem. How you're collecting the money usually is.
absolutely. Okay, now shifting gears a little bit here into maybe like the results and the impact of like implementing this change in payments. Chris, getting a little specific here, what did commencement parking look like for you once payments was in place?
Yeah, so commencement is interesting because we didn't charge anything for commencement 2 years ago.
Mhm.
Um, uh, the year before last year was the first time that we actually charged commencement parking. We charged a parking fee for commencement parking. So commencement, our campus also this year just shifted from a 3-day commencement cycle to a 4-day commencement cycle. So what we did was we basically built out one off-street link for all of commencement and used the different options to denote the different ceremonies. We had 3 ceremonies per day for 4 days, 12 ceremonies total. And we made those permits valid for the entire day, but we asked them to select the specific ceremony that they would be attending. That way we got information on what our expected attendance would be. We did off-street exclusively for this. We had no last cashiering at all. It was very important because we had multiple events going back to back that people needed to be able to get in and out and cover that payment without getting stuck in traffic. That was the most important thing for commencement, and that made it the perfect match for off-street because we can just put out a bunch of QR code signage, just drive into the garage and park first, then scan the QR code and pay once you're out of your car. That frees up all the space on the roadways and clears out traffic much faster and efficiently than the old model of having a last cashier take payment on entry. There was a couple of other things we did as well. We considered our normal campus student permits valid during commencement. So really, we were only asking the guests, the parents, the grandparents that were coming in to visit. They were the ones that needed to pay for parking to cover their vehicles. And then we went for an extremely low parking rate. We basically did a $5 pre-sale and a $10 if you're paying on the day of. Um, we had about 60% of people use the pre-sale. Overall, this year we actually increased the amount of revenue we generated over last year, and we didn't even change the price. So in year zero, we made zero, but in the first year with Offstreet, we made I think $76,000, and then this year we made around $120,000 again without changing any of the pricing at all for this. So it goes to show the adoption rate was really good. It continues to grow. And we also do no enforcement activity. We were not allowed to conduct enforcement, but we still, did some checks just to see what our compliance rate was, and it was still very high. So overall, it was a great success for us.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay. So then have you rolled out any new paid parking programs that didn't exist before payments?
Yeah, we've rolled out several. Our campus has 2 different event venues. We've rolled out off-street payments for both of those. All of our pre-sale for all of our major events at those 2 venues are all on off-street now. We've implemented off-street for a lot of more campus-related events like new student orientations, campus tours with our prospective student center. Residence Hall Move Out Week. We also implemented stuff for payments for non-event related functions as well. Some of those are, for example, um, student athlete travel we were having a problem with, and payments came in really handy for that. We also implemented Offstreet for our NCAA tournament we hosted this year in March. We hosted a March Madness tournament. We hosted the first two rounds, and we did Offstreet only. We didn't collect payment with LAS, and we had a huge success there as well. And we've also implemented paid parking for other like sort of non-SDSU related events, but want to use our parking space. So San Diego Comic Con, we just did last weekend. That was pretty successful. And then we also have now been able to use Offstreet as a backup system in case we're a T2 customer. If we have an outage or anything like that, we can actually use Offstreet as our business continuity tool and use Offstreet payments for that purpose as well.
Comic-Con, that is an interesting one. Okay, so I'm gonna pass it over to Imogen here. Getting into more advice. What advice would you have for a campus parking team that is considering the rollout of payments, maybe earlier stages?
I would say make the first event small enough to prove, and nearly everything else will follow from that. Practically, though, like choose one use case and decide or define what success means before you start and keep those metrics operational. So that could be fewer complaints, less manual work, fewer visitors holding a citation that they never should have gotten. That's something you can show in 8 weeks, which is roughly how long you'll hold anyone's attention. The second would be like go where you're wanted. A department that's enthusiastic and shares in your pain point is worth a lot more than you or more to you than your busiest garage.
Mhm.
Talk to Treasury and IT security early. It's really important that these folks have a seat at the table early. It will save you time, emails, and just headache. Uh, and then something that SDSU did really well is they met their guests where they were at. Um, they use their commencement site, emails, Canvas, GradFest. They put the parking links in places they knew families were going to check. They didn't just put it on the parking website. That visibility is really effective in like driving the success of your event. Um, if you can only manage one of those things, I would say manage the first. A small win you can point to is going to beat a good plan that nobody's ever seen work.
Hmm. Absolutely. Okay, so I'm going to switch the conversation around here a little bit before I ask Chris the next one. I'm going to ask another question, but this one is for those of you watching. It's a bold one, so feel free to drop your answers in the chat. I'll even just send it. Curious, what would Offstreet need to do to replace your current pay vendor? Is it you're looking for a better guest experience, maybe lower fees? I know that came up earlier. Is it just the integration with your existing systems? Is it more flexibility and payment options? Or is it maybe just easier administration? Let us know if you want. Um, so while you're doing that, I will throw it back to Chris here one more time. So now going back to that theme of advice, if someone here in the chat is attending today is like, okay, this sounds great. Where do we even begin? Can you maybe touch on like your biggest lessons learned?
Yeah, I think the biggest lesson learned would be communication with, other departments on your campus. It was very clear and evident that we would need buy-in from other people outside of our department
Mhm.
to make this switch as successful as it was. So we engaged those stakeholders as early as possible. We were transparent about what we wanted to do and why. And I think like I said earlier, some departments, it took a little while for them to warm up to the idea. Others were completely on board from the jump. But that communication piece was key, and we could not have made this successful without our key partners around campus.
Is there anything maybe you do differently?
I would. Honestly, I would train more people on my team on how to use Offstreet. Originally, when we first kind of brought Offstreet into our department, it was kind of just me and Scott that were kind of doing everything. We've since trained some more people on our team on how to use Offstreet. I would recommend, yeah, I kind of, it was my idea to bring Offstreet to our campus. So I treated it as kind of like my baby. And I need to let that go a little bit. I need to be less protective of it. Yeah, just kind of having other people on your team help you out with it, I think is super important. Um, it's important for you yourself to understand how the system works, but your team definitely needs to know how it works as well. So I recommend, early on making sure everyone else on your team that needs to engage with the system is trained and knows how to use the system as efficiently as you do.
Absolutely. Let's say last one for you here, Chris. What's like the biggest benefit for your team?
I think the biggest benefit actually is the data. I
Yeah.
think, I know we kind of have hit on data a couple times during this discussion, but just control over our own data. It's there when we need it at, the tips of our fingers. We can use that to kind of feed back into Scott's algorithm and verify it and refine it and make sure our numbers are correct. All of that has been super, super helpful for us. We can make better, more informed decisions that gives us more flexibility. It gives us less risk, and it's been very successful for our team.
Awesome. Okay, I'm gonna throw just my last couple questions here to Imogen, and then we'll get right into Q&A. I know there's lots of questions popping in the chat, so don't worry, we're gonna get to those. Imogen, for campuses just starting to explore payments, what's like the first conversation they should be having internally?
I would say like start with an inventory, which is not so much a conversation, but before anyone, sits down and talks to their account manager, somebody on your team should write down the use cases that you have. Most campuses have hundreds of permit types, and only a handful of those are staff and students. The rest tends to be made up of your guests, contractors, departments, events, arrangements somebody made years ago and nobody's, revisited. That list is always a lot longer than people expect, and until it's written down, you can't really tell what you're solving for. The conversation after that one is the uncomfortable one, and it's what Chris kind of pointed at when he said that this took months with other departments. The obstacle isn't so much the software, and with payments, it does come down to like how the money's divided. Athletics takes the lot and the revenue, parking takes traffic and the cost. Uh, Revenue will land in one place, cost lands in another, and nothing crosses over. Software alone won't settle that, but what it does change is what you can put on the table. Today, the argument is something to the effect of like game days are hard on us, which is true, but it doesn't really move anything. With data, it's here's the what the game is cost in staffing. Here's what came in, and here's the difference. Um, which is very effective in like starting that conversation. I would say start with the inventory though. That's something you can do this week without anyone's permission, I think.
Start without permission. Noted. Okay, so then before we head off into Q&A, Imogen, there is an exciting update relevant, I think, to anyone considering payments. We've recently unlocked a lot more payment gateway options for universities. Can you tell us a little bit more about this?
For sure. So we've expanded our gateway support at Offstreet. We're now supporting over 10 gateways, all of which are popular among campuses. There's Transact, CashNet, of course, Authorize.net, and Elevon. We're ready to go live with those today. So if you're interested, we will share resources. I'm sure Kyle, you'll get to this. And I don't want to steal your thunder. That breaks it all down for you from what to expect through onboarding, what we need from you to get started, and um, we're we've done a lot of work on the payment side in the last in the last quarter, and we've really unlocked payments for a lot of our clients that have been waiting.
Awesome. Thanks, Imogen. Don't worry, you weren't stealing my thunder. Okay, let's get into some Q&A. I know we're going a little bit over time, but we do really want to answer these. Sydney has been sending me the questions that have been coming in the chat. So we'll kind of start off with the first one, question from Troy. Imogen, any chance for a basket feature for purchase of multiple permits?
Yes, that is definitely on our radar. It kind of ties back into that comment I'd made about pricing being like a card math decision, like uh, being able to put everything in a basket and just go through the transaction once is also going to make it so your transaction fees hurt a little bit less. It's on our radar. We know how important it is, particularly to like the event experience and just, like general contractor permitting or department visitors, etc. So yes, it's on our radar, and we know how important it is.
Love it. Love to hear it. Okay, question from Whitney. I think this one is kind of directed to Chris here. How is it communicated about new expectations about paying to park through a new platform for event parking so guests knew what to expect?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So there were a few strategies we used to get this done. Basically, the first one was website updates, right? Like I said earlier, we had two event venues on our campus that we switched over to Offstreet for pre-sale. They already had existing like parking information infrastructure on their website, so it was a matter of updating that and getting those web pages to link off to the Offstreet pre-sale link page. That was step one. Step two was basically to update the off-street link with sort of know before you go information. Jodine's team and Offstreet actually helped us create these materials, but we made a PDF map of our campus that is actually embedded into the Offstreet purchase link. So you can click on it, download the PDF. It has a map showing all the parking garages, all the necessary information, the walkway routes. So you can see like, oh, okay, it'll take me 5 minutes to walk from this garage to the venue, and stuff like that. So people can make a lot more of an informed decision. Those are great for getting, your people who are like, pre-planners informed about what they need to do. But
Yeah.
you're going to have a lot of people who are just going to show up. So that's why we didn't get rid of our LAS staffing completely. We cut it in half. The remaining LAS staffing, their job is to tell people what they need to do to make sure that they're parked properly. So they will be standing at the entrances of the garage and common walkway areas where we've also placed A-frame signage with all the information on how to pay. And the LAS's job is to basically now just to answer questions when people ask, like, hey, like, how do I pay for parking? What do I need to do? I'm having an issue here. And then the LAS staffing can actually help them work through that. And that again has allowed us to cut our LAS staffing in half while also leveraging like maximum value from Offstreet.
I bet those Type A attendees are loving those PDFs you guys are including. Okay, question from Ryan in the chat. What infrastructure or signage did you deploy on game days, and how did you communicate with the parkers how to pay on the day? I think that's kind of similar to, I guess, the previous question. But if there was anything you wanted to add to that, feel free.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I'll add is that we, regarding like signage placement, we really tried to over sign.
Yeah.
Like we place the signs with the QR codes at the entrances of garages. We place them in common walkways near elevators and stairwells. Places where we know people will go. We try to put a sign there. And that way, there's like no possible way that you can miss the sign on how to pay.
Hmm.
And I think that's helped us to get to where, our really good compliance rates are.
Hmm. Okay. Question from Steve here. Are gated lots being used? And if so, are gates up or have you gotten off street to work with the gates? Great question.
So we only have one gated garage on our entire campus. Most of our garages are ungated, and our one gated garage we don't really use for events. It's more of a retail garage for the Trader Joe's that we have on our campus.
Mhm.
Um, so we don't really have a need to use off street or interface off street with the gate arm in any way. We have sold event parking out of that garage in the past, but it's always been in a very limited capacity. And when that happens, we just put the gate arms up, and we will usually put a last cashier there. It's not a garage that we sell on off street. It's not a garage that we like typically use for anything other than Trader Joe's. But most of our garages that are event facing are all ungated.
Cool. Okay. One last question here from Kyra. Is there a possibility where payment may be split between the event host and the event guests? Like if the host wanted to pay for 50% of the permit fees?
That's a great question. We kind of have similar arrangements with our campus. So, for example, we do a revenue share with our associated students on the revenue. So the customer will pay the full price, but our associated students will take $3 per sale. That's a simple, our department takes in all the revenue, and then we report to associated students how many sales we made that night, which is super easy now because we have a report that can generate it.
Mhm.
And then associated students will just invoice us for that amount. It's a pretty simple revenue sharing agreement. Um, if there was a difference in um, if a customer is getting like a discount because a department's paying for part of it, that's not really something that we've done. But I imagine it would be pretty possible through a similar circumstance where you just simply lower the price, and then you keep track of how many sales you've made, and then you would invoice, the partner department for the difference. I'm pretty sure that would still be possible.
Mhm. Okay. Oh, we have one more question here. From Jacob Lee. He's wondering, our campus already adopted a mobile payment through Park Mobile. What would be the value and benefits we can expect when we add Offstreet to sell permits? Maybe
The
I'll.
biggest thing, in my opinion, is that there's no user account. So that transaction goes much faster. On our off-street page, all you do is punch in your plate, and we ask that you give us your email so we can send you a receipt. Um, and then you put in your payment information, and that's it. And if you have your payment card tokenized on your phone, it's even faster. So with Park Mobile, obviously you have to create an account. Um, you have to navigate with a location code and go that route. I think it's a lot slower. And that's the biggest advantage to us for Offstreet is we're able to keep that traffic flow expedited because the transaction is so much faster.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. That's all I think the questions that have been thrown in here. If we missed one or if you think of it later, feel free to shoot us an email or find a way to get to us. If not, if we find it, we'll get back to you on it. But that brings us to the end of today's webinar. Chris and Imogen, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your experiences and insights. I think it's safe to say everyone got a great kind of behind the scenes look at what it actually takes to introduce payments on campus and more importantly, I think the opportunities that can come from it. So before everyone hops off, I have a couple quick things for you. First, you'll notice a final poll on your screen. So we'd love to know what your next step is. If today's conversation sparks some ideas you'd like to chat about how off-street payments could fit into your operations, let us know in the poll, and someone from our team will be happy to reach out. And while you're answering that, second thing you'll see on the screen eventually is a QR code that links to our off-street payments guide. So it includes many of the use cases and results we discussed today, along with information on supported payment processors and how to get started. So if you haven't already taken a second to scan that, feel free to do that now. And don't worry if you didn't catch everything in the webinar today. We did record it. So we'll be sending out the recording along with the payments guide to everyone who registered. And finally, if you have any additional questions, again, after today's webinar, don't hesitate to reach out to your account manager or to anyone on the Offstreet team. We'd love to continue the conversation, continue chatting. But yeah, thanks again for spending a part of your day with us. We really appreciate it. And shout out again to Chris and Imogen for being here and being awesome and talking all about payments today. But yeah, we'll see you, I guess, at another Offstreet webinar very soon. Take care, everyone.